So, hey everyone, it's Justin Goddard here from Game Plan for Life, and we're here with a very special guest. We're going to let her introduce herself in a little bit, but we're going to be here just having a good time and talking a little bit about the importance of not only our faith, but how that plays into racing. Without further introduction, we are here with Miss McKenna, so we're going to let you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us about your story.
Yeah, my name's McKenna Hasse. I'm 27 years old. I currently live in Indianapolis, Indiana, but I'm from Des Moines, Iowa, and I race sports handling sprint cars professionally.
Awesome. So we have a few questions we're going to ask you a little bit about. So we know you definitely started in racing when you were 13, which is very, very early. And you also are a owner of your team. So tell us a little bit about what inspired you to get into racing and, just that path from being from 13 to all the way up to where you are now.
Yeah, so when I was about 9 years old, I met NASCAR driver Casey Kane in a shopping mall when I was a kid. And that kind of sparked my interest for NASCAR, for racing. And I had a cousin that raced junior sprint cars in Oklahoma. So that was kind of my first taste of figuring out that kids could race too. So combining just all those factors, started following sprint car racing, started following NASCAR, and saving my money, just pretty much doing anything I could to get involved in the sport. And there was a local track owner who had a grandson racing and told me that I could drive his car. And so did that and did pretty good. Saved up my money and just started with a couple $1,000 and bought an outlaw cart and started racing. And then just mainly wanted to race, but thankfully was able to have enough success and sponsorship to just kind of keep working up the levels, and started racing sprint cars when I was 17. And same thing, just kind of worked through the different levels of sprint cars, and then a handful of years ago moved to Indianapolis to just kind of keep furthering the racing.
That's pretty cool. So did you have like a certain coach or someone in your life that was very pivotal for you in those early ages of getting started?
It was hard because not coming from a racing family, it was hard because there wasn't a lot of people to lean on, and racing lineage is really important sometimes, and there's a lot of people at the track who have a lot of family members who've been in the sport for a long time. So that was always a really hard thing for me growing up. Was my dad and I are really close, but he wasn't necessarily super into racing. He had a little bit of a background knowledge on it, but I just basically started seeking mentors, and especially when I started racing sprint cars, I would always go to the best drivers there were. And even though they were very intimidating, when I was that age, I don't know, had the courage to just walk up and ask. And I found that, they were willing to share a lot more because you're younger and you're not even in the same division as them. So I learned a ton from some of the best sprint car drivers that have ever raced. And that was a huge blessing. And honestly, wouldn't be where I am today as a driver without that.
Oh, that's really cool. So would you say you're like a racing family now that you're like the main one that's driving and everything?
That's a good question. I mean, in some ways I would kind of say so. In other ways, when I moved to Indianapolis, my parents don't really go to the races or anything like that if I'm not racing. And so I don't know I think we are a racing family, I guess, in some ways, but I don't know if it'll ever be quite my family's passion in the way it has been mine. But I'm just really grateful for how God's used it anyway. And sometimes I think doing something that's so far outside of your family's reach and realm really shows that something is from God.
That's true. I love that. So one really cool thing we learned about you, you were featured on American Ninja Warrior, not once, but twice. So can you talk a little bit about that experience, and then if that kind of correlated to your racing experience?
American Ninja Warrior was absolutely incredible. It's something that I wish everybody could see behind the scenes. Anytime you see something on TV, it never shows the full picture. So to see the course in person, it's absolutely magnificent. And just to be a part of the production and meet the other ninjas was really super cool. And being on the show is basically you just crawl through the screen. You don't get to see the course ahead of time. You don't get to practice on the course, anything like that. And so you basically walk out on the stage and the crowd's chanting your name and the cameras are on and you get one shot at it. So a very nerve-wracking experience, but it is really super cool. And the training was very tough. We would train every single day for the show. And but really God put that on my heart at the time, and it really, really helped my racing. And that's something that when I haven't trained for Ninja, I've noticed a difference, especially being kind of smaller in general. That really built my upper body strength for the race car, and in sprint car racing, that's really important. So I don't think I would have it had some of the on-track success that I had at that time without Ninja Warrior, and just what a cool experience to be a part of for the rest of your life.
Yeah, no, that definitely is. Do you feel like there's some type of, workouts or anything that you've done in American Ninja Warrior that you kind of still do today? Part of your workout routine, or?
I need to do more. I've been training with football players the past couple of years, and so a lot of it's been lower body, and Ninja Warrior used to be upper body. So I would say that I miss probably our most famous practices. We would do not very often, but 500 push-ups, 500 pull-ups in an hour. So that was tough for sure. I would say I miss doing the pull-ups and the rope climbs and all that type of stuff. It was pretty brutal sometimes, but it definitely you're definitely strong. So
Yeah, that sounds intense.
mm-hmm.
Wow. So, Knoxville Raceway, you are not only the first, but you're the only woman to not only win there, but you're the only person that's won there in 120 plus years. So, if you could just talk about what that feels like and just knowing the impact that has already had, but will continue to have on that racing community.
Yeah, I mean, it was big at the time. It was something that I never would have thought would be such a big deal, I guess. And I started out just going to Knoxville as a fan in 2009, started racing there in 2014, which was kind of a miracle in and of itself. I never really thought I'd have the opportunity to race at Knoxville. Then most certainly didn't think we'd have any success, but thankfully, we were able to get that first win in 2015, and then was able to collect 5 wins total in 2 different divisions. And so it'd be awesome to win in 410, which would be the third and final division there. I think only 6 drivers have won in all 3 classes at Knoxville, so I think that would be a really cool record to achieve. But regardless, just so grateful for that. And I think just to look back on something like that and just remember those nights and like how excited the fans were and just how special it was to us as a team, and like really just to be a kid with a dream that's fulfilled, I think is a gift worth being grateful for. I think sometimes when you accomplish something in life, people are always like, oh, what's next? Or could you do this? Or could you do that? Or they compare or whatever. I think sometimes I wish people would just take things more as a gift and take them for what it is in the moment. And so I think for us, we look back and we're grateful for the gift that those wins were. And of course, it can be tempting in life to always want more, to even the times we ran second at Knoxville, we were so close many other times, and so easy to look back and think, oh, we could have had more. But you know what, I never would have thought we'd have not only one win, but even the opportunity to race. And so we're just very grateful for what it means for the track, and just for how God really used it and really just validated my faith in him through that.
Yeah, that's really big. I think I've noticed even like in my own personal life, like it's the times where you kind of think, like you mentioned, like coming in second place, that you're like, okay, it's not first, but it's still something you should be grateful for. And then you ultimately see how God really works in your life, and maybe next one you're first, maybe next one, the whole team does great. So
absolutely,
that's a really cool story. So staying in that racing environment, talking a little bit more on your accomplishments. So you've had a plethora of experience and achievements in your racing career, including a 100 plus career top 10 wins. You've qualified for Knoxville Nationals, Kings Royals, the B Main. Is there a certain accomplishment or a certain race that you can look back at and say, like, that was a pivotal time in my life, or that was a very special moment that you felt like God was really working in your life?
I mean, really, I think just any of the firsts are always, kind of big. I mean, as silly as it sounds, even when we were racing micro sprints, I had some pretty good success right out of the gate. And I think even that was kind of pivotal for me, was anytime you move up a division and have some level of success, it kind of is like, oh, okay, like this, like God has this here for a reason, like maybe this is actually going to work. And so I really think like, my first micro win, my first sprint car win, just every time you move up a level and have some type of success. I think at the 410 level, I mean, even we've not made the A main at any of the national shows, but even making it to the B main in some of those races, it can easily be overlooked by everybody watching sometimes because there's so many cars competing. But for us, I mean, those were huge moments given what we were working with. And I think the past couple of years I haven't had full-time mechanics and just had a lot of challenges thrown at us. And so I think to be able to go to some of those races and compete at least as high as we were able to, again, you can always want more, but I do feel like God was always just showing up and showing, keep going. Or even on the bad nights, really, those have been really pivotal too from the fans, because a lot of times the fans have just, you can just really feel God working through them. I guess you can really see them. It's just sometimes saying like, please don't quit, or like, please keep fighting, or whatever it may be. And that's always been really inspiring to me, that they're not even there Monday through Friday. And to think people have no idea some of the challenges we've had to overcome, but it's almost like they somehow have a sense that they know, and just to hear that encouragement from them is huge, because I think sometimes people can misconstrue what you're really fighting for. And I think when you hear things like that, it's a great reminder.
Yeah. We can tell you definitely have the competitive spirit. Kind of going into what you just mentioned with your challenges, is there a certain big challenge that you feel like you faced being in such a male-dominated sport? Whether that's internal or just something external that you had to deal with?
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of challenges, but I really think being a team owner has been really challenging, more so than what people might realize, especially being either young or female, because when you're trying to hire mechanics or when you're trying to get sponsors, it's really easy to get overshadowed by people who are older or male or whatever. And that's been really challenging, is to get people to take you seriously. You might have all the talent or all the values or all the professionalism that you need, or the knowledge, and people can look at you and just assume you don't have any of that. And so that's really frustrating, trying to convince people that you're capable without using too many words. I guess I want to show people what I'm capable of, but sometimes in order to get opportunities, you kind of have to tell people what you believe you're capable of. And so that's a hard balance, I think. And I think just the spiritual battle, there's not, sometimes in competitive arenas, like God can get left out. There might not be a lot of believers, and there can be, like spiritual attack with that, I feel like, and just people wanting you to conform to their ways when that's not your values. And so I think over the years, just consistently being on defense at the right times, and then offense on other times for God, and just really trying to balance, these are my values and I'm not going to sacrifice this for any reason, and not believing the lie that you have to.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Really good. All right. So speaking more on your team and into the ownership, has there been any experience that you feel like it's been really rewarding as being both like a driver and an owner?
Definitely. I had the opportunity the past couple of years to have some high school students working for us when we didn't have any full-time mechanics. And it was definitely a situation where sometimes you can look at the other teams and see that they have more money or larger crews or whatever. And it was really humbling for me to look at our crew and to see these high school kids that were learning and helping, and they were loyal and they were faithful. They were just good kids, and just to see the way they respected me and wanted to learn, that was definitely a moment for me that it was like very encouraging as a team owner to see the impact that we were having on the next generation and inspiring younger kids to get involved in the sport.
Yeah, and I think that's important too, just being able to still be progressing in your career, but you're still at a point now where it's like you can still give back. And even though it's not necessarily going out and signing autographs or taking pictures, you're still giving back in a way that's still affecting people, arguably more, by giving them that chance to work with you. So that's really cool.
Yeah, it's, you really have to, one of the hardest things in life, I think, is just to remember that it's not about you. And obviously we're all very special, very important. We all have a purpose that God's given us, and we're very special to God, but to not make the sole focus of our life about us. And that's so hard sometimes when you look around at a world and see a world that doesn't always live that way. And I was reading scripture this morning about like the walking through the narrow entrance, and how many people walk through the wide entrance. And it's sometimes the right thing in life is so unnatural. Sometimes the faithful walk is so unnatural. But ultimately, like, that's where scripture says you're going to be the most blessed in the long run. And so I really try to fixate on that, but it can feel so challenging when you look around, even just in your sport, and you feel like you're doing the wrong thing because it's different, when really you have to look to scripture and realize that, you know, the ones who came before you for Christ were different too.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. All right, so one of the coolest things you do is Youth Racers of America. Can you talk a little bit about like your involvement in that and then the opportunities that's kind of given throughout that program?
Yep. So in 2015, I founded Compass Racing Development, which was just kind of my own personal way to get back to the sport and giving kids the opportunity to race. And then I expanded that in 2019 and created Youth Racers of America, which is basically a national youth motorsports foundation. And we provide resources for kids new to racing. We provide resources for kids in racing. And then we have a teen career program where we help teenagers pursue jobs in racing. And so kind of hitting, you know, different elements of people wanting to get involved in the sport. And it's something I'm really passionate about, not coming from a racing family. I know the challenges of trying to get involved in racing and not really understanding it, and there not being a lot of terminology used that is easy to understand. And so I created YRA to do just that. And it's been cool to see, you know, the kids that it's impacted. It's really hard because it's just me running it, and we have a great board of directors. And so it is difficult to impact as many kids as what we like to, but we do try our best and just want to see the sport be sustained in the long run.
Yeah, that's good. I think the educational piece too is also super important. I've been in here for about maybe 4 months now, and just recently learned what a diecast is. So,
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, the importance of it is definitely there.
Yeah.
Kind of in that same boat, Compass Racing Development. How has that once again kind of like provided like opportunities, but more importantly, how have you been able to add your faith into that program and to like really allow people to see the racing side, but also through your faith?
Compass has been all God, like start to finish. I mean, really, that was so spirit-led. I started Compass when I was 17 years old, and from a faith perspective, you know, I was kind of in a really pivotal point in my faith where, you know, my faith kind of took off right in those early years of Compass, and God really used that program to grow me closer to Him and to show me what it looks like to just to trust so many different forms of sacrifice, you know, trying to love these kids as if they were my own. And I don't know, I mean, it's hard to sacrifice a lot for somebody else if you don't have the love of Christ in your heart, because He sacrificed for us. And not only that, but loving it. We talked a lot about sacrificial love, and Christ's love was sacrificial. And when you sacrifice something, you're not expecting anything in return, and you're not expecting to get it back. And so I think with Compass, that's definitely taught me that, where it's like, what does it look like to just give love away, give resources away? And obviously, you know, it's hard to love perfectly by any means because we're not Jesus, but just trying our best to love others as if, you know, as He would call us to. And it changed my life forever. I hope for the kids it hopefully changed their lives in a positive way too. And just really, I mean, I think it just really showed all of us like what God can really do when we sacrifice and surrender our lives to Him. And I think with Compass too, like the money that I put into it was not really a smart, quote unquote, financial decision at the time. I really felt that being something God was calling me to sacrifice was, will you sacrifice your money at a really challenging time in your life when you're getting ready to go to college to do this, and trust that I will multiply it? And I feel like God, what He's done with it, what He's done with our story is incredible. And I'm so grateful that it's been able to inspire so many people. And really that's what it's all about. And I'm so thankful that I didn't wait, because I look back on those early days of Compass when I was 17, 18, 19 years old. You're never going to get that back. You know, I don't live in Iowa anymore. A lot of the kids in our program are graduating high school now that started when they were really little kids. So you really get a different perspective on time when you start something that young, and just really seeing how sometimes if we don't take an opportunity that God presents to us, it might not always be there. We can't always assume that tomorrow's going to come. We can't always assume that God is going to lead us in the same way down the road if He's calling you to do something. I think of the disciples when they dropped everything and followed Jesus. That was instantaneous. It wasn't, I'm going to sit here and think about it. Maybe God had been preparing our hearts leading up to that, but I think just being open to when you're called to do something, do it, because you never know what God's about to do next.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I think the best part about that, like that I think is so cool, is it's your fruit of listening and being disciplined. And when God says, move today, you're moving today. And although the Bible tells us to lean not on our own understanding, and not understanding what God's about to do, but still trusting in him is so big. And so it's really cool to see how the fruit of that has really worked out for you, and how it's really been able to impact the kids that you've been able to impact. Kind of going into discipline, a lot started for you at 13.
Yes.
Not what the average 13-year-old would be doing. And so, but you could speak a little bit on what your school life was kind of like, being 13, and then middle school and high school life, and what that was like, kind of having a different life and more responsibilities than the average teenager.
Yeah, starting the race team changed everything for me. I feel like that responsibility I took very seriously, especially when it came to my sponsors. I remember being in middle school and high school and telling my friends so many times, like, no, I'm not going to do that. Like, I have sponsors watching, but, and nothing terribly bad by any means, but I took everything pretty seriously, even just when it came to staying above reproach, even if you're not doing something, what does it look like you could be doing type of thing. And so it really caused me to grow up pretty quickly. And, again, there's sacrifice in that. And I think I was willing to make that sacrifice just because I loved what I was doing and I really felt God in it. And so, yes, I missed out on a lot of fun things that, kids might do in middle school and high school. But you know what? I got to do a ton of fun things too. I had great school life, great classmates that could have asked for a better school experience. And so when I wasn't racing, I was in a school that I loved with people that I loved, and you kind of got to be a normal kid, right? But then, there was in high school times where I'd leave and go to pretty big companies, corporate headquarters, and meet with the CEO and pitch my racing dream. And so it was just really cool to get to experience some of that at such a young age, but also get to enjoy, the joys of being a teenager and all that good stuff. And so, yeah, just grateful for all of it, but it was, extremely challenging. But yeah, I just feel like God blesses you in that as long as you're pursuing him.
That's really big. You mentioned that you would miss out on a lot of fun, but you would still have your own fun. So can you kind of explain more on because I think that's a big thing that a lot of people in our generation kind of miss, is that do you think that following God means that you're not going to be cool, you're not going to have fun and things like that, which isn't the case, but you got to experience that. So kind of just going into that. And then also you mentioned that you wouldn't do certain things, obviously nothing crazy, but because of the look of the sponsors. And so can you kind of speak a little bit on, although you may not always be where you want to be, but because where you want your future to end up, just the importance of being at a young age and still having to make sure that you're watching what you put online, you're watching who you're hanging around, and just the importance of that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure everybody has experienced in life a moment where maybe they tripped and fell and stubbed their toe, or maybe got a cut on their arm just from something really simple, and how long that takes to heal. And life is kind of the same way. You might think, oh, I'm sure this could have happened or that could have happened, or I have the rest of my life ahead of me, surely this, won't matter. But the mistakes you make at any age can impact your life drastically for a long, long time. And something very simple could become something that you have to be intentional about healing for many years to come if you go down a path that isn't what God has intended. And God can absolutely redeem and restore anything in his way and time, and if we put our trust in him, he absolutely can do that. But we have to put our trust in him. And I think people do sometimes think like, oh, I don't believe in this, or I don't believe in that, or I don't want to be restricted, or that must be boring, or whatever the case is that they think that way. But God is freedom, and we talk about our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. We talk about, have you been saved? And the reason we use that terminology is, you don't need saved if you don't need rescue from something. Like, what do we really need saved from? And if you find yourself in a place where, man, I'm doing what everybody socially thinks I should be doing, but yet it doesn't give me life. Or, I'm doing what the cool kids say, but it really isn't that cool, or it's not even fun, or even if it scares you or whatever, there's a reason for that. Like, that's not from God. It's not going to satisfy. And in the grand scheme of the world, what those people think is absolutely nothing compared to what God thinks. And I think if you can look up, you'll see that this world is really big. And when I traveled all over racing at a young age, especially driving through all these little towns across America, it's like, wow, this world is really, really big. And there's a lot of people in it. And when you look at your purpose in that world, God can absolutely show you a greater purpose than having fun at a party, or, whatever temptation, might be coming at somebody. And it's good to have fun, but, there hasn't been a day in my life when I've been following Christ where there wasn't hope, even in the hardest days or the darkest days, or, whatever that looks like. God is going to be the one constant, and you can't go wrong with that, no matter what you think is the right way or the best decision or whatever. Even kind of like what the chaplain was saying today, even if you don't know God, God knows you. And so it doesn't hurt to give something a try. It doesn't hurt to, even if you don't believe something, go to church and listen. And, I always say best case you end up in heaven, but if you're wrong and you don't pursue it, it could end up brilliant. And so, I just can't encourage everybody enough that, like, the secret to freedom is Christ, and like the secret to joy is Christ, and fun and all that. Jesus is fun, and he wants us to have fun, but in a way that's safe for us. And so I'm so thankful that I've gotten to live such a fun and full life, and it hasn't always been easy, but the one constant has been Christ, and I'm grateful that no matter what I do in life, that'll still happen.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. It's very well said. Kind of going into that too, can you share with us your journey through coming to Christ, and then obviously still continuing in that, and just how your growth through following God has really just grown overall?
Yeah, I went to church when we were pretty little, and then middle school, high school, my family didn't really go to church, but praying was something that I always did every single night, and just really believed in God and talked to God, and felt like he kind of would speak back, I guess, in some ways. And when I started racing, I really started praying, and I can remember just so desperately praying on my knees when I was 13 to 17 years old, for God's guidance in my racing career, and it would just bring me to tears, just how powerful those prayers felt. And when I was in high school, I started having basically these visions of Jesus that I would talk about, and I didn't think much of it really at the time, because I guess it's just something that I just thought was, something that you think about, I guess. But then I went to college and joined a college ministry group called InterVarsity Christian Fellowship, and it was pretty uncomfortable because I hadn't really been a part of organized ministry like that. I'd never really been in a Bible study or been in a small group or anything. And so even though I felt like I knew God to an extent, I didn't really know ministry that well. And I really did feel uncomfortable, but I just kept going back, and was going through some pretty tough challenges in racing, and just surrendered it all to God. The Christian community I found was just so welcoming and answered all my questions, and I just went all in with Jesus. I just surrendered everything to him, and he just started moving mountains. And I think one of the most important elements of me finding God was understanding spiritual gifts, because for me that was something I hadn't really heard much about, and I could see God using that in my life. And so I think really coming to this recognizing that we all have spiritual gifts that God's given us, and he wants to use us to better the kingdom and wants to use us for a greater purpose. For me, that was just this epiphany of I was just in awe, I guess, of what God can do and how he can use people. And so for me, that really propelled me towards wanting to have a relationship with God, because anytime, if you have a purpose, you want to go to the person who has the purpose for you and ask them as much as you can. And so I think that just really grew my faith and led me to Indianapolis, and God just never stopped moving.
Yeah. You said something that really caught me. You said that it was God's guidance.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in sports, we kind of think like, even being a former athlete myself, you know, you think of the day of a game and that prayer that we tend to pray that's, you know, God help me win. You know, give me the win today. And the difference with that and guidance is that God's guidance is guiding you through like the path in your life. But that doesn't always result in you winning.
Yep.
You know, that doesn't, and if it does, it's not immediate sometimes. And that's mainly because that's God's way of pulling you from something to bring you and to redirect you into where you're really supposed to be at. And so I think that's super important. And I love that you said that, because there's definitely a difference there. And I think with God's guidance too, it requires a lot of patience. There's a lot of times where, you know, you may go through 3 or 4 seasons without a win. And even though it may not feel like it, God's still working with you at every race, you know? So just knowing the difference, I think, is so important. And I think you said that very perfectly on just the guidance of God. So moving forward a little bit, but staying in your faith, you are a very busy individual. How do you manage to like make time for God, you know, within your schedule? And I think another thing too is just how is it when it comes to prioritizing God in your relationship now as being, you know, so active in the industry?
Yeah, I would say I rest more than what people probably think. You know, a lot of times when people hear the different things that I do, they'll say, when do you sleep? And I get 8 hours of sleep a night. Not every night by any means. We've had plenty of sleepless nights, but I really feel, you know, or I fully believe when you make space and time for God, he'll take care of everything else. And I've really spent more intentional time studying the Sabbath, and the biggest conclusion I've come to is that even God rested on the 7th day. You know, even God who created the universe rested on the 7th day. And what I do like to remind people of, though, is that he did create the universe and everything in it, in the world, in the first 6 days. So I also try to remind people when they say, oh, you're working too hard or whatever. It's like, I like to let God define my capacity, and I try to be intentional about resting, which is hard. It can be really hard. But, you know, I would say evenings are really my time often to spend with God, even though I'll listen to worship music during the day. I try to pray in the morning, but really I like to pray reflectively at night, spend time in the Word. And the best is, though, when you can really, truly, like, spend long periods, like, just truly resting in God's presence and hearing what he has to say. And sometimes that's the toughest to make time for, but for me, that's just, it's really in those moments where it seems like everything else gets propelled in life, because you can go a lot further taking the time, you know, to sit and rest in God's presence, versus it almost feels like if you didn't take the time to punch in an address before you figured out where you're going, you're like, oh, I'll just try to figure it out. Well, it's like, if you take the time to figure out where you're going first, it'll be a lot smoother getting there. So
that's a great analogy to use. Man, great. So we're going to segue a little bit into some fun facts. So we just want to do like a little rapid fire questions. So in the interest of staying like in the biblical side, do you have a favorite Bible verse that is like your number one favorite Bible verse right now?
Acts 20:24 is on all of our stuff. It's my life is worth nothing to me. My only aim is to finish the race and complete the task the Lord's given me, the task of testifying to the good news of God's grace. When I first read that verse, it just kind of felt like, you know, a verse that I wanted my life to be defined by. And so that's kind of the one that we've always gone with.
Yeah, that's awesome. So if you were to choose one biblical character to be, who would you choose?
Oh, man. I guess I'll go with, that's a tough one. In some ways, I think David, just because, I guess just, I think, of course, of David and Goliath, you know, and just kind of seeing God work in ways that seem impossible and using the least to accomplish so much.
Yeah. I mean, you and David have a lot in common. Got worked with you at a young age and continue to work with you through that. So that's awesome. I'd probably say the same. Probably along with that, recently you did sign with Interstate. So first, congratulations on that. It's a big deal. Talking a little bit more on that, can you speak on what it means to have your name associated now with guys like Dale Jarrett or guys like Bobby Labonte, and just having your name being a part of those, that hierarchy of names? And so speaking a little bit on the importance of that makes
yeah, I mean, it's really incredible, honestly. And I think what I've really taken the most from it is we were talking about patience with God's plan. And I think it can be so easy to sometimes look at scripture and think, oh, God says we need to be patient, that his ways are higher, and all these people in scripture had to take the long road. And to think we understand that, but then to expect instant, prayer fulfillment like the next day. And Interstate and just our whole story working to that point is just really a validation, I feel like, of God's faithfulness. And to be affiliated with a company that is so iconic in motorsports is really, really special, because I absolutely love motorsports, and the history of NASCAR and NASCAR in general was a big part of the reason I fell in love with the sport. And so to be able to represent a company that is so meaningful from a faith perspective, but also from a motorsports perspective is really, really cool, and I couldn't be more grateful.
That's awesome. Going more into Knoxville. So Knoxville is a very historic race and a very historic place. Obviously, you have a plethora of experience there. But as someone who has a lot of experience there, what does it mean to you to be racing there at such a legendary track?
It's pretty special. I mean, it's a very challenging track. And, when I look back on it, just how God has used Knoxville in my life, it's just one of those things that runs so deep that it's hard to even put into words. And so, yeah, I think it'll forever be just a really important piece of my heart. And to even just live where I lived and to be able to grow up racing at Knoxville it's pretty cool. And it's a track that I'm very proud of and wish that everybody could come and witness. It's really special. The Nationals is such an incredible event. And so I'm just super thankful for the opportunity to call that home, basically.
That's awesome. Do you have a certain race at Knoxville that's like your favorite race that you've had?
I mean, the Knoxville Nationals themselves is such a cool event. And I think a couple of years ago when we made it to the B-Main and had some good prelim races, that was really cool. And I mean, obviously any of the wins there are special, but just all the fun nights that we've had and just all the fans that we've gotten to meet, it's just such a cool environment.
That's awesome. Yeah. More into Knoxville, do you have any specific goals for this weekend?
I mean, I feel like every year the Nationals in August kind of is the main focus, and so I think leading up to it, for our team, since we have a limited budget and we're not on the national tour, we're always trying to learn to take whatever we can from the races that we do get to race leading up to the Nationals to really kind of put that towards the Nationals. So obviously we'll fight as hard as we can, but making features is always the goal at a big race. And so we'll keep working towards that.
Sounds good. So another question I'm going to ask is, what is it like having Cup racing in Iowa? Can you talk a little bit more on that experience and how fun that's been?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a long time coming getting Cup to Iowa, so I'm sure it'll be absolutely huge. I think Iowa's a big NASCAR state, and so I'm sure they'll get plenty of fans, and I think it's sold out. And so that'll be really exciting. I think it's good for the sport, and I think it's like I said, it's too bad it's taken this long, but I know that people will be super excited. I'm excited, and it'll be pretty awesome, especially since I actually watched Casey Kane race there in an ARCA race. That was my first NASCAR race I attended. And so, that was clear back in 2008. So to now have Cup there in 2024 makes me feel really old, but it's also really cool.
Yeah. So that's amazing. Finishing off, you're owner, you're a driver, manager, you do a lot. Is there any advice that you would give to anyone that's at a young age right now that wants to get into the sport, you know, in different mediums, but they just don't feel like they know what they want to do yet, or they just feel, you know, almost pushed away from it because they're young. Is there any advice that you would give, you know, just any young driver or, you know, interested person in general?
I would say get your hands on anything that you can, you know, scratch and claw, do whatever you have to do to do anything. Even if it's, I used to go to like just really local races that, you know, they might only have 2 cars and I just still wanted to watch, you know. I mean, countless tracks are looking for people to help. Like I did plenty of jobs for no money, even up until like a pretty old age, really. So just do whatever you can and don't put your worth in it. You know, don't put your whole identity in racing, put your identity in Christ. And that's going to be the hardest thing you ever have to do in racing, hardest thing. But it's the best decision you can ever make, because racing, no matter how far it takes you, will never fully satisfy you. And I think in anything in life, that you know, money and fame and even just doing what you love or being an athlete, it looks amazing. And if God's placed that dream in your heart, go for it. But don't not include him in the matter, because I think it's taken me a long time in life to reach a point where it's like, okay, like, you know, this is fully surrendered to God, and whatever his plan is his plan. And that doesn't mean that God won't answer all your prayers. It doesn't mean that you won't make it to the highest level. It just means that you'll do it in such a way that you'll enjoy it a lot more. You'll be more fulfilled, and you'll be doing it the right way with good people. And I think that's something I'm grateful for. My careers, we've had really good people, and it's been a joyful experience, as hard as it's been. I mean, it's been very, very, very hard, but I just think don't make it your full worth, and don't make it about others too, impacting others, making a positive difference. You know, don't compare yourself to others. Don't try to put others down or try to step on anybody to improve yourself. You know, just be the best person you could be, and give it everything you got, and give back, and then just give it all they got.
Yeah, I think that's so important too, because, you know, when we get super involved in the things we do, the sports, you know, the industry, it's so easy to take the attention away from God and to put it second place. And so it's super inspiring for me to hear that, you know, through everything you've been a part of, through everything you've done, that you still managed to keep God first. And I think that in itself is just such a powerful thing, because when you keep going and you keep going and you keep going, like, God will work for you, but he'll also work through you, work through you to reach other people. So that's just very, very inspiring to hear. So what's next? What would you say is next for McKenna Hasse and Haase Racing?
I would say it's literally up to God, 100%. You just never know. You know, every single season you know, especially up until this point, I never had a multi-year contract with sponsors. So at the end of every racing season, it's just, you know, the bank account starts back over, and you pray that you get enough sponsorship to race another season. And so it'll be interesting. I'm anxious to see what God has in store. I would love to do some different types of racing and do some asphalt racing, and just continue growing as a business person. And so, yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to see what God has in store next.
Well, that's all the questions we have. Your story is honestly amazing and extremely inspiring. So here at Game Plan, the rest of us, we just, you know, want to continue to support you and everything that you do, and, you know, we'll definitely be praying for you and everything that you do. So
thank you so much.
Thank you for taking time to be here with us. You know, definitely really appreciate that. So
thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Is there any last, you know, comments or anything that you want to leave?
I mean, maybe just to give it, you know, that there's equal opportunity to give God glory and praise in the losses than in the wins. You know, that was just something that you said that made me think about is something that I've learned, is that if people can see you still bring the God in a loss, it might even be more powerful than when you win. So, yeah, I think that's about all I have.
All right. Well, thank you, and thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you guys in the rest of the videos. And if you guys like this video, we're going to link all of her socials in the comments below, so you guys can check out McKenna and everything that she's doing, and continue to support her as well. So thank you guys, and we'll see you guys soon.